first-hand eyewitness history. And I want to talk to you a little bit about before. I want to just sort of set things up. I remember those 9th graders, 10th graders, 11th graders? 10th graders. Awesome. So you've studied World War II. You've studied the dropping of the bomb. You know the history behind it. And I want to talk to you a little bit about why history is so important. I know history is boring sometimes. But I think about why it's so important to remember what happened because it repeats itself. It's important to remember what happened because we forget sometimes that those were real people that were involved in those things that happened. We study history and there's numbers and dates and places, and I know I taught 10th grade at Eastside Community High School, and we talked about the bomb, and it was just 70,000 people in Hiroshima. It was just numbers. It wasn't real people. And how often do we get a chance to hear somebody say, well, I was there, this is what happened. So remembering is so important. And for somebody like our guest, Toshiko, TANAKA, to come here and remember for you, to share her memories with you when they were the most painful memories you can possibly imagine. To be in that situation and then tell that story again and again. And Toshiko-san travels all over the world. She has been to every, if you talk to her, you'll have a chance maybe to talk to her after our gathering and ask her some of the places she's been. She travels and tells her story again and again and again. Imagine pain, and then you relive it. It's a gift. It's saying, this is so important for you to know. This is so important for you to make sure it never happens again to any people in the world. You're 10th graders, you've studied World War II. I'm not going to recap all of the history, but we do know that on August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb was dropped on a human population. It had been tested before in places where people weren't living, but it was dropped on a human population. The devastation was beyond imagination. 3 days later, another bomb, a different bomb, was dropped on the population of Nagasaki in Japan. Again, tens and tens and tens of thousands were killed immediately, hundreds of thousands later because of what is it that made this weapon so different than the other weapons? Radiation. Because this was a weapon that sort of didn't just stop with the impact. It went on and on. So people years later died of radiation. The ground was contaminated, air was contaminated, the water was contaminated. I'm going to digress or move ahead for a second to say contamination and radiation is something that we're very familiar with. A year ago, there was a big earthquake in Japan. Did you read about it? Did you hear about it? What happened was that nuclear power plants that were on that fault line where that earthquake took place were damaged. And radiation was released into the atmosphere, it was released into the ocean, it was released into the ground. And at that time, and still today, a 50-mile radius around that area had to be evacuated. People cannot go back to their homes. Maybe not ever. It will be contaminated for a long time. So radiation is powerful, and it's something that makes these weapons so different. I don't like any weapons. I don't like guns, and I don't like swords, and I don't like any weapons. But nuclear weapons are very different. They don't stop with one generation. They don't stop with the person that was killed. They go on. And so Toshiko has dedicated her life to going around the world to talk about nuclear weapons and about and nuclear power and the connection between those two and why it's so important that we are aware of it. I think I want to talk a little bit about the present because you guys know the history. You have your own opinions about whether the dropping of the bomb was justified or not. I know in the school where I work, we always did debate. Was it a justified decision to drop the bomb? Many people said it ended the war quickly. It saved many American lives. The other side said it wasn't necessary. The Japanese were ready to surrender. There's lots of arguments on both sides. That's not why we're here. That will be argued forever. But we're here to talk about what happened after the droppings of those bombs. And what happened was, it became the new weapon. It became like the weapon of choice. suddenly, when World War II ended, the Soviet Union, at the time, now Russia, and the United States, began this arms race. They started building bombs like crazy. And then other countries started to build bombs. Does anybody have any idea how many countries have nuclear weapons today? Any guess? Take a while. 35, a little bit lower. 5, a tiny bit higher. 7,
12.
8, 9. It was eight's our closest winner. 9 countries have nuclear weapons. There's several other countries, though, that are developing nuclear weapons that we know about. Let's see if we can get anybody to stand up. Stand up if you think you know any of the countries that have those nuclear weapons. I think you know a country. I mean, I believe one is kind of ours. Okay, name one. United States. Biggest weapons producer. Russia has nuclear weapons. That's 2. Germany does not, interestingly enough, although they were trying to develop them at the time during World War II, but they were, after the war, they were, their whole military was kind of stopped in their tracks. They didn't develop nuclear weapons. That too. China has nuclear weapons. That's 3. Yes. Japan does not have nuclear weapons. Interesting. That's an interesting answer, but it has not developed nuclear weapons. Yes.
The Middle East?
North Korea has nuclear weapons. Yes. England has nuclear weapons. Yes, it does. Iraq does not, although there was a rumor that they were developing them, and that's why our country invaded Iraq, because we said they're going to do it. But they never did develop nuclear weapons. So we've got 5. Pakistan, and
I think
Pakistan's
Israel.
big enemy?
Israel?
Israel, but that's not Pakistan's big enemy. Yes, Israel has nuclear weapons. Who's Pakistan bordered with?
India.
India has nuclear weapons, and we need one. And somebody said Israel,
Yeah.
and now I'm confused that we need one more, and I've lost track. United States and Russia.
France.
England and
China.
France. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we have 9 countries with nuclear weapons. We have several countries that are in the process of possibly developing nuclear weapons. We don't know for sure, but we suspect that Iran might be developing nuclear weapons. We don't know. At this moment, as far as I know, there are about 23,000 nuclear weapons. 23,000 nuclear warheads in the world. It's a lot. The majority, I'm sorry?
Why are there so many?
Why are there so many? Because it was one of these things, because you don't need that many, right? I mean, we could destroy this planet with, a couple hundred. Why so many? Well, Russia made some, so the United States said, we're going to make more. So the United States made more, so Russia said, we're going to make more. And it became an arms race. Who could get the most? Who could get the most? And Russia and the United States have the most of that 23,000. Of that 23,000, 2,000 are on instant deployment. They could be deployed at any minute. They could be deployed immediately. Scary thought. Fortunately, we have responsible governments that are not doing that, but these things exist. I want to do a tiny demonstration that is going to show you how much firepower those 23,000 nuclear weapons. I'm going to need a volunteer for my demo. Front row. It's good to say front row. Fabian, my assistant Fabian and I are going to show you. Yes, you need to more louder. Can you hear me? I'm going to talk louder. I usually always shout at home at my kids. I'll get my kid's voice on. Okay, this is what we're going to do. We need the microphone, which is up here. I'm going to have you hold that microphone, and we're going to see how that sounds. Wow. Imagine that sound. Imagine that sound is the sound of all of the all of the firepower of World War II. And that includes the 2 nuclear bombs. That includes, what else did they use in World War II? Tanks. That includes tanks. I'm sorry. Machine guns. Planes. Submarines that had torpedoes. Landmines. Hand grenades. Everything. Think of World War II, you've studied it. Think of all the firepower. Think of all the death. Think of all that stuff blowing up. And this is the sound of all of it. Okay? Now close your eyes for a second. And I want you to listen to the sound of what the 23,000 nuclear weapons that exist in the world would sound like. Any thoughts on that?
That sounds so realistic, like in a movie.
With the microphone, I know. We're into drama. Yeah. It does sound. It sounds like it is. Terrifying. Terrifying. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts on that? Yes.
How long did it last like that?
How long? It depends how slowly you pour them out. I kind of cut the hole too big, so it came out a little fast. It could be really.
No, I mean like in real life. Like,
In real life, how would it? You know what? In real life, you wouldn't. Do you think you could probably blow up the entire world with less than 23,000? Yeah. In fact, this is so many times more than anybody would need. So it wouldn't last long because I think everything would just vaporize, and it's frightening to think about. I mean, there are countries that are working to disarm. There are committees on disarmament. There is a movement to get rid of nuclear weapons. And I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking the next thing I'd like to talk about is the future. Now that you've heard this, what does that mean for the future? And it means that my generation, and worse, my parents' generation, have really made a mess of things in a lot of ways. And I apologize, I'm so sorry. But now, although my generation is working hard towards changing things, I have to say, it was my parents' generation during the Cold War, during the arms buildup. You guys actually are more powerful than you think. You will have the right to vote, which is one way to show how you feel about things, but you also have your voice, and you also have your intelligence, and you also have your creativity. And just the fact that, and we're going to hear from Dr. Cynthia Miller, whose father was a human being who worked on this project. It was human beings who made this happen. You are human beings, and you can make this change. This wasn't a machine. This was people making decisions. And so I'm hoping that the next generation, your generation, goes into the future, leaves school, and says, I'm going to make a change in the world. I'm going to use my intelligence to make good things happen. What are some things that, youth can do to make things different in the world? What's that? Sorry. You think, are you powerless? You can educate yourselves first and foremost. Find out more. So whatever I said today, whatever Toshiko-san says today, whatever Dr. Cynthia Miller says today, go online, look things up, educate yourself, find out more. Yes.
When I was 19, 20, 21, this issue really bothered me because it was looking so close that the world was going to head into nuclear war. And I did 3 pilgrimages, where I walked from New York City to Washington, D.C., 250 miles with about 100 people each year. And on that walk, we would collect petitions, we would hold rallies, we would do educational groups. The 100 of us would stay in churches, and we would do more education about the nuclear arms race and just how bad it was and what was going on. And we were specifically aiming for a START II treaty. This was a treaty that we were trying to get passed that would lead to an end of, that would lead to a capping of how many nuclear weapons Russia and the U.S. would have. And the START II treaty did come about. And it's an example of that political action that we always talk about here that I want to see you guys do someday, is that getting that involved in something as scary as nuclear arms is something that when you go to college, I did this with college friends, that you can make happen. And I hope someday I'll hear from one of you guys that you took part in some kind of public protest on issues important to the nuclear arms race.
You can even start here at school with a club. Or you can start by talking to friends and say, I saw this person today and this is what they told me about nuclear weapons. You can start right here in this room. And hopefully you take it to college, and hopefully you take it to your adult life, and you get involved, and you don't let things happen to you, but you make things happen.